Lately, college football is more like a high-stakes poker match without a dealer at this point. The SEC and the Big Ten have been facing off the past few years, controlling and playing the game without anyone in charge to say what's fair and what's not. Because in the current college football landscape, power has shifted from the NCAA to being dominated by the Big Ten and the SEC. This power shift is driven by three main things right now. Number one, the financial superiority that the Big Ten and the SEC hold over everybody else. Second, the future formatting of the college football playoffs and how they basically decide all of that. And then finally, the NCAA's transition has basically gone from a governing body to an enforcement arm, an enforcement power, to one that is just completely always living in court at this point. I mean, eligibility cases, everything else, they're basically living in court. So without the NCAA having any real power and without a commissioner, there's no real leadership going on for all of college football, right? And honestly, I don't think this is going to be my most popular episode or a segment out there because I'm going to explain how the sport's heading toward a fractured way, as Greg puts it, that could honestly kind of rip things apart at some point faster than trouble with the snap, right? That whole thing. Basically, if you zoom out and see college football for what it is right now, we've got conferences acting like rival gangs, each hoarding talent, TV deals, and NIL cash, all while pretending they're part of the same neighborhood. And as someone who's knee deep in all of this stuff every single day, I can tell you the sport isn't thriving when it bends over backwards for us, the Big Ten, or for the SEC for that matter as well. Neither one. It's great for when that is the focus of them because the entire sport is not the Big Ten. The entire sport is not the SEC. And I'm not talking about TV ratings and viewers. I'm talking about tradition. I'm talking about the game of college football we grew up watching, which I'm not saying the change is necessarily bad. Obviously, college football is great right now for Big Ten people. Big Ten's winning. The Big Ten's dominating. I don't hate all the changes that are going on, but right now, it's not serving fans because decisions are being made for the most gain of conferences, of certain teams, of certain people, and not for the diehard fans, not for what we grew up knowing college football as. Because when the conference comes together, or the conferences come together to decide what's next, there's no direction, there's no shared goals, and what we're struck with is conferences fighting over who can gain the most and what compromises can be made so other people can gain more instead of what's best for the sport overall. Meanwhile, things get out of hand. The transfer portal, which is making every player a free agent at the end of the year right now. Coaches are just asking for an ounce of stability. It feels like they don't need to be the dictators that they were in the past where, they're just like bossing around the players like crazy and stuff. They just want to know how to have some stability. And as Paul Finebaum pointed out on a radio show in Columbus, Ohio last week, he said, quote, "Just do not want to have to go through this every year," end quote, talking about the coaches. They don't want to have to go through this transfer portal stuff and everything every year. But good luck with that. The portal's exploding because there's no central authority to rein it in. Right now, they're just trying to rein it in, not letting 26-year-olds play their 8th year of eligibility at this point. And listen to this. According to data from 24/7 Sports, they put together some data. More than 3,200 FBS scholarship players entered the transfer portal in the winter window alone, this last window alone for the most recent cycle. That's over 25% of all scholarship players jumping ship annually, over 25%. The chaos keeps talent moving, going someplace else, and it also prevents any real stability for some of these coaches. Now, I know I'm crying for the coaches and stuff like that, but it's also for the fans too. You want to know players. You want to have players that you feel like you know and have grown up in your program. Without a commissioner to hammer out some of this stuff and have some enforceable rules, conferences are left scrambling, recruiting not just to teams, but trying to lock players into the conferences themselves. That's right. The conferences are currently trying to put wording in players' NIL agreements, not contracts, NIL agreements to keep them not only at the school, but also in the conference. In order to keep all the talent, the Big Ten recognizes that they might not be able to keep all the talent at the schools they go to, but they might be able to keep the talent in conference. And that's happened this past cycle to where players were able to leave their school, but because of some of their wording and their NIL agreements and stuff, they weren't able to leave the conference. Although fans might hate it, right? The Big Ten is okay with players bouncing from, say, Ohio State to Michigan or USC to UCLA instead of going south, instead of going to the SEC or the Big 12. It's not like you might not have to stay in your room, but you have to stay in the house, right? Kind of that whole way here. It sounds smart, but it can't happen without NIL agreements and contracts and stuff like that hold up. We're starting to witness this with the Damon Williams case, where the Big Ten flexed and kept him at Washington. It wasn't just a one-off win. It was a step for the Big Ten to find their own sustainable fix. All of this stems from the distrust the conferences have with one another. It's not just disagreeing on playoffs. That's the biggest thing, and that's the thing that everybody thinks of when they think about the conferences disagreeing. The Big Ten wants rules fairly enforced, because this goes back years before now, before all of this stuff even happened. They want rules fairly enforced, but they cannot trust that a cap limit on revenue sharing will stop the cheaters down south, because it didn't stop them before. And the SEC talks a big game about acting upset when Texas Tech is skirting the rules and seeking reform from tampering, but we also never see any action by them against their own teams. Their morals are spotty at best. Not even their morals, but their words are spotty at best. This lack of trust doesn't just create a rivalry, it turns conferences into these kind of self-serving empires, I guess you could say, battling for dominance, not only on the field, but off the field as well, trying to gain any advantage they possibly can. Andy Staples, another person that I'm going to say I agree with a little bit that I don't normally agree with. He wrote an article recently, and I agreed with more of it than I thought I would. He said college football is a, quote, $4 billion industry being run by feudal lords whose interests only occasionally align, end quote. And I love that wording from him, feudal lords. That is the perfect visual for this situation. Sankey in the SEC castle, Petiti in the Big Ten fortress, lobbing catapults at each other, over each other for playoff formats and everything else. They can't even agree on a 16 or a 24 team. And in fact, not too long ago, The Athletic reported once that their sources said the SEC would be okay with a 32-team playoff, but not a 24-team playoff, which I found really interesting. But as Finebaum said in the same interview of the Columbus radio recently, we have to stop hoping for a college football commissioner. This is where I agree with him that I didn't think I would agree with him. But he says we have to stop hoping for a college football commissioner, or as he puts it, a czar of college football. He said people are wanting somebody like Nick Saban, that was his example, to step in and fix everything. But Finebaum admits that Saban is, Saban is too old school. He has too much SEC bias to bridge that gap between the two. And I got to tell you, I'm starting to like that Finebaum didn't leave the country at this point, right? He's got some better takes here recently than I thought he would. And quite frankly, he's doing a pretty good job with some of the stuff. Not everything, but in this situation, he is. I never thought I'd say it, but essentially, without someone overseeing the kingdom, we're seeing conferences drift toward isolation, maybe even breaking away from the NCAA entirely and just playing their own, interleague schedules or something like that. Now, would that be the end of the world? I don't think so. I don't think it would be the worst thing ever. If the SEC went to their own silo and the Big Ten did their own thing, as long as they still play each other in the playoffs, I think it's fine. And the playoffs make, my opinion, the playoffs make too much money for anyone to get rid of. But without a unified calendar or structure, the playoffs won't get any better, and it'll keep fracturing and keep not knowing what to do, and kind of like annoying cracked windshield steadily keeps spreading in the cold, right? You get the one crack on your windshield, it keeps spreading. It's kind of what's going to keep happening with the playoffs here if we don't get any type of unification at all. And the TV numbers show this as well, that the playoffs are great. And the 2025 regular season, SEC games average nearly 5 million viewers per game, nearly doubling the Big Ten, who had 2.8 million per game, and that data comes from the Wall Street Journal and Sports Business Journal as well. They had nearly double, and that's not just a gap; it's a chasm between the two, showing how the SEC's brand pulls eyeballs in the regular season, not the entire time, but in the regular season. Now we've talked about how viewership numbers aren't the end all be all, but they're still substantial. But if you look at the competition and data after the postseason, the Big Ten was better on the field. Indiana topped the resume, ESPN, FPI rankings, and their undefeated run followed closely by Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Oregon, while SEC powers like Georgia and Ole Miss were no higher than 7th. The Big Ten is winning on the field, but that needs to translate into the perception war as well. And that's really where some of this talk gets the biggest, because without leadership, the perception war is only going to keep growing and growing and growing, and there won't be any balance when that starts to happen. It'll be interesting to see how next college football season changes things with how the SEC has been hoarding the casual fans, but now the Big Ten's chase of prestige is more threatening than it's been in a long, long time. And of course, you have the SEC going to 9 conference games, next season, in addition to the Big Ten not forcing an out-of-conference Power 4 opponent. Honestly, this is kind of like two siblings fighting over the remote. Who wants to turn on cartoons and who wants to turn on a documentary or a comedy or whatever it might be? And nobody's watching the family movie. Nobody's getting together and saying, hey, let's all watch this together. Honestly, it's kind of sad, because that's what college football has become. How can the Big Ten get what they want? How can the SEC get what they want? It's no longer conferences, it's leagues. And historically, we've seen this before. Admittedly, I'm too young. I didn't live it. All right. Some of you may have, but if you did, or if you read up on it like I did, this is kind of like the AFL and the NFL rivalry back in the 1960s. You see, back then, they were two leagues that poached talent, bid up salaries and nearly bankrupted each other until they merged into one commissioner in 1970. If that sounds familiar, it should, because college football is heading that same way. But without the merger incentives, the last time this happened in the college ranks was in 1984, when the Supreme Court smashed the NCAA's TV monopoly. Conferences splintered TV deals, leading to realignment and power grabs that echo today's chaos. That's how you eventually got schools that were independent to join conferences, like Penn State, Miami, Rutgers. They eventually joined conferences. Notre Dame, they resisted, and it worked out for them, but it couldn't work out for everyone, because you just couldn't have that many independent teams going off and getting their own NBC deal or CBS deal or whatever it might be. You see, without a commissioner, or repeating history, but worse, because it doesn't look like the Big Ten and the SEC want to come together and unify at all, like I thought would happen a few months ago. That's what I thought. I thought it only makes sense that these two will eventually come together and form their own super league. We're seeing the conferences fragment into their own super leagues at this point. They're not coming together for one super league. They're going away and forming their own, with the Big Ten trying to add more teams and outpace the SEC through money, perception, and tying itself to the NFL for that kind of pipeline prestige. The Big Ten wants to be known as being the primary place for the NFL to find their talent, aiming to be the main talent feeder with recruiting and development. But the more conferences keep battling alone, other conferences become afterthoughts. Like, somebody's going to eventually become the XFL to the NFL. And I know there's like the AFL or the AFL now and everything else, but if you know the XFL, you get what I'm saying. A second-rate spot for overlooked talent trying to climb up the ranks and just trying to get to that next league. Good for the Big Ten, sure, but overall, bad for college football, bad for a league of chaos and craziness that feeds on having 100+ teams who can theoretically all have a chance to win it all at the beginning of the season. So what's the fix? If there is too much division for a college football commissioner, what can be done? And I think there is too much division. I think there's too much people going against each other. I think there's too much of the Big Ten and the SEC not agreeing. Honestly, it kind of goes back to Andy Staples' article I told you about earlier. He's right. College football needs a collective bargaining agreement. A CBA has to come first, and then a commissioner can come. It's the only way to get an antitrust exemption from Congress, to lock in rules on pay and movement, and treat athletes like the pros they are. I know no one wants politics in college athletics. Don't hear, I'm not advocating for that. Please don't hear me say that. Believe me, I don't want it either. Right? I don't want politics in my college football either. But schools are dragging their feet, and conferences are more interested in beating up on each other, hoarding all the talent themselves, rather than coming together and doing something that's best for the sport overall. I think the biggest, kind of radar that put this off for me was when Dabo Sweeney even flipped his script, admitting it might be the way to, quote, protect the collegiate model, end quote. Without it, the feudal lords keep ruling, and they won't stop until they have destroyed each other. So we have to ask, which is less college football? Which one is better for college football? Is it better to have fewer teams and one conference dominating it all, or players getting paid? What do you think? Are you cool with the conferences battling it out and seeing which one comes out on top, and somebody becoming the XFL and the other one becoming the NFL and risking that all? Or are you more interested in a larger amount of competition with players not only getting paid but signing on to be on the team with actual contracts? Would love to know you guys' thoughts. Let's see what you guys are saying here in the comments.